now go to our guy Zach Berman, who joins us now from PHLY. Looks like he's out and about today too. Zach, a tighter game than you guys probably expected yesterday. That was just inches away, quite frankly, from the Panthers coming away with a win and what would have been an incredible game-winning touchdown drive for Bryce Young.
Yeah, if you obviously watch our show and check out our coverage and just walk around Philly today, it doesn't seem like the Monday after a win. There's a lot of frustration about the way the offense played, in particular the passing game. Now you can say that when you're 11-2 and on a 9-game winning streak, that might be unfair. Although the reality is, when you're 11-2 and on a 9-game winning streak, the barometer for the team is not can you beat Carolina in Week 14. It's what will it take to beat Detroit in January. What will it take to beat Kansas City in February? And the reality is, a passing game that has fewer than 100 net yards passing, when AJ Brown doesn't get more than 2 targets going into the fourth quarter of the game, that's problematic. And so these are things that the Eagles need to look hard at and address during these final 4 weeks of the season.
Yeah, I highly encourage people to go check out, not only follow Zach, but his colleague over there at PHLY, Fran Duffy, doing some great breakdowns as far as the passing attack. But like, how big a concern is it right now, Jalen Hurts? I mean, you asked AJ Brown point blank yesterday. He said, "What's slowing him down?" And he said, "Passing."
Yeah.
Where is maybe some? Where can they make some headway between now and the end of the season in that department?
Throwing AJ the ball, and it seems simplistic, but that's the reality of it. He might be the best receiver in the NFL, as well as Saquon Barkley's playing, as good as Jalen Carter is, Lane Johnson. I think AJ Brown's the best player on the team. For AJ Brown to be, like I said, go into the fourth quarter with 2 targets, that's his fewest of any game since being on the Eagles when he's been healthy. That's problematic. So AJ appeared a bit frustrated coming off the field after a 3-and-out in the second quarter. And his frustration was justified. I don't think this is the tendency of like a diva wide receiver. I think this is the tendency of a competitor who knows that the best way to win is to get your best players the ball. And the Eagles are fortunate enough that they won that game. And Saquon breaks the franchise record, has over 100 rushing yards again for the 9th time this season. But and I get it's kind of selective, or fans elsewhere where might say, why are you saying but after another win? AJ Brown, Devontae Smith combined for 10 targets. There were 18 receivers in the NFL who had at least 10 targets alone yesterday, right? So these 2 players are Pro Bowl, all pro caliber players. They're the envy of the league, of a lot of teams in the league, and the Eagles need to get them more involved in the passing game for this to be as prolific and as efficient as it should be.
So, kind of paying attention to this game from the outside, as we were obviously all covering our own teams yesterday. It felt like I wanted to give the Panthers credit though for how they played, and certainly Bryce Young's been better recently, which I think is sort of one of the more underrated storylines of the past month in the NFL. And again, if anybody missed this game, I mean, this was almost a 97-yard touchdown drive by Bryce Young and Xavier Legette with no timeouts, and with 47 seconds left, Bryce Young appeared to hit Xavier Legette at the 1-yard line, where he was rolling into the end zone for what would have been the go-ahead score with the extra point, and it turns out Xavier didn't quite secure the ball; it hit the ground incomplete. So I guess where I'm going with this is, did this game feel like one of those games where it was just Carolina playing really well, or was it the Eagles? Was it more the Eagles struggling or the Panthers playing well?
Yeah, it's a fair question, because you could say the Eagles beat the Panthers by the most points they've been beaten in the past 4 weeks, right? The Panthers played the Chiefs tough. They brought the Bucks into overtime. So the Panthers are playing better, and I was really impressed with Bryce Young. You hit it on the head. That late drive, it it could have been a 97-yard game-winning drive with no timeouts against the defense that entered the league number one in the league. I'm sorry, that entered the game number one in the league. That says something. That says something about his development. I do think the Panthers played well. I think that's a team that is improving. That's better than their record. Spoke to Lane Johnson after the game. That's the exact terminology he used. That's a team better than their record. Jordan Mailata said the same thing. Saquon Barkley said the same thing. So yeah, the Panthers deserve credit for it. That said, I thought there were opportunities for the Eagles, particularly in the passing game, and I keep going back to that, and that's where I think the Eagles got in their own way. I don't think that was a byproduct of the Panthers' coverage. I don't think that was as much a byproduct of the Panthers' pass rush. I think when you're talking about the passing game in particular, you give I put that more on the Eagles didn't play well. I think when you look at how close the game was overall, the fact that the Eagles were 13.5-point favorites and Panthers almost won that game, I give the Panthers credit for that, especially when you consider, you saw the person who bet what $3 million on the Eagles money line, biggest bet. So yeah, I mean the Eagles were expected to smoke this team, and I'll say this too, the fact that the Eagles didn't play their best ball and won is a good thing, because the reality is they're coming off a huge win against Baltimore, a primetime win over the Rams. There's a tendency to have a letdown, and they wouldn't be the only team to have a letdown. For them to win and not play well is a good thing, but they need to play better.
I know we're going to get deeper into the Saquon conversation. It's a weekly event here on the All City Monday Huddle, but Saquon 20 carries, 124, over 6 yards per carry. Is the passing attack, does it fall victim in a sense to getting into a rhythm with Saquon rolling on the ground? Like, is it possible to create a negative out of that at all?
It's a valid point, and some of the receivers say they do need to get in like an early rhythm. This is a run first team, but I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I think Saquon can have the production that he's having, and the Eagles still be more effective through the air. And I'm not saying that's the thing. There's this. I don't want to be misconstrued that you can still have the type of rushing offense they have. You don't need to throw the ball 35, 40 times, but you need to be more efficient through the air. If you're going to have 26 dropbacks in the game, then AJ Brown needs to be more involved, and Devontae Smith needs to be more involved, and you need to have more than 100 net yards passing. But you do raise a good point, and this is a run first team. That is the formula that's been working for them. And Saquon Barkley's on a historic pace. He's on a pace to set the NFL single season rushing record. And when you're 4 games out from the end of the season, when you're in December, you can realistically have those conversations. So the Eagles won't pass the ball like the Steve Spurrier Florida teams used to, but they can strike a good balance, and they do need to get involved. They do need to get their star receivers involved early. The Eagles haven't scored a touchdown on an opening drive this season, which when you think about the fact that they're 11-2 and they haven't done that, that says a lot about how they recover. 3 of the past 5 opening drives, AJ Brown hasn't been targeted, so that shows you there are ways that he can be schemed up. Now, when you watch the film, when you mentioned Fran Duffy's broken this down and has shown there are plays that are schemed up to get AJ the ball. It's incumbent upon Jalen Hurts to get him the ball.
All right, well, let's have that Barkley conversation now in terms of these records, because here's what he needs to do in the final 4 games. I'm sure you guys are talking a lot about this in Philly, but last 4 games, if he wants to break Eric Dickerson's NFL single season record, he needs that average just under 121 rushing yards per game at 120.75. And then to just become the 9th running back to get into the 2,000 yard club for a single season certainly seems doable with how he's been playing. If he can get to 94.25 yards per game, so just, get to 95 per game over these last 4 games, that seems doable. It's interesting, Zach, hearing you talk about sort of this internal battle, though, to get the passing game going at the same time. What do you think is realistic here for Barkley as the Eagles try to figure out their priorities going into the most important games, which will be played in January?
I think it's realistic for Saquon to break the record as long as the Eagles are playing competitive games in Week 17 and Week 18, and that's one thing you have to keep your eye on, because there is a world that exists where Detroit has that 1 seed locked up. The Eagles kind of have the 2 seed locked up. And I don't think the Eagles go record chasing. I think for I think what you mentioned is accurate. I think their focus is on what they can do in the playoffs. But if Saquon needs to, if the Eagles need to win games, if the Lions stumble here, or if there is a chance where the Eagles need to be competitive in Week 17, in Week 18, just as long as Saquon stays healthy, I don't see him slowing down. Those numbers that you're talking about are not unrealistic. Like I said, he has two more 100-yard rushing games than any other running back in the league. This is standard for him. You look at the defenses they're playing. After Pittsburgh next week, you're seeing the Commanders, the Cowboys, the Giants. Those are teams that he's already run on this year. The Giants, he had what, 170 yards and didn't play the fourth quarter. And by the way, just imagine the drama of Week 18. Saquon against his former team, and he has a chance to break Eric Dickerson's record. Just imagine John Mara and Joe Shane watching that. So yeah, I think this is entirely conceivable. Saquon Barkley is a historian of the position. He knows all these numbers. He's heard what Eric Dickerson said. I think the 17th game certainly helps in terms of him being able to get it. But I think at the minimum, 2,000 yards should be a benchmark for him. The last running back to have as many yards as he has through 13 games of the season is Chris Johnson in 2009, and that was a 2,000-yard season for Chris Johnson.
CJ2K, man, I remember it. I mean, he got a nickname out of it. Saquon, I mean, if he goes the stretch here, it'd be his first 17-game performance of his career. I got to imagine these next 2 games are going to be telling and dictate if he does go for it, don't you think? I mean, with huge matchups against the Steelers and the Commanders, they can wrap up the division, I think, with a win over the Commanders, and it just seems like this is, if he's going to do it, he's got to have some big time performances.
I'm sorry, I missed that part of the question. A phone call was coming in that. Yeah.
You're good. I was just saying. I mean, you mentioned the upcoming schedule. I mean, because if they were to stumble against the Steelers or the Commanders, probably takes them out of vying for that top spot, because the margin for error is not there with the Lions rolling. I mean, I got to imagine like these next 2 games, if we're looking at what he needs to average, they got to be pretty. These next 2 performances against Pittsburgh and Washington, it's got to happen. He's got to have some big games there if he wants to have a real shot. The last 2 games pretty much could be meaningless.
Yeah, you're right. Or the Lions need to stumble here, because the reality is there's not a third division team. There's the NFC South and and the NFC West don't have a team that's really threatening the Eagles for the number 2 spot. So the Eagles could kind of be locked in there. So yeah, Barkley needs some headway during these next 2 games, and then Detroit needs to lose, which is conceivable, against Buffalo or Chicago, perhaps, right? For the Eagles to have a realistic fighting chance of the number 1 seed. I don't think the Eagles are going to start sitting players with 2 games to go, but it's more that Week 18 game. I think even if Saquon has a chance to break that record going into Week 18, if the Eagles aren't playing for anything, knowing Saquon, knowing Sirianni, knowing what's at stake for the Eagles this season, I don't think they put him out there to get like 150 yards when they could be playing a playoff game 6 days later.
All right, well then I'm going to root for the Lions and Vikings to keep winning. So because the storyline of him doing that against the Giants in Week 18 would just be phenomenal. So I'm all about the storyline on that one. Zach, thanks so much. Great work as always, and everybody should be following Zach at ZBerm on Twitter. He's on Blue Sky as well. Great stuff for PHLY. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
We all silly like the mayor.